a second time. I call the member for Barton.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I want to speak about this piece of legislation that cuts to the very heart of fairness in our social security system. For way too long, the rules that govern how debts are raised and managed have been outdated, inefficient and at times downright unfair. This bill before the House finally begins to put that right. I come to this debate not only as a member for Barton, but as someone who's spent more than a decade in the law, advocating for people who were often up against systems stacked against them. For many people that find themselves relying on social security payments, the system can either be a bridge to a new life and a bright future, or a bureaucratic barrier that keeps them trapped. And I can tell you, when a person feels like they've been buried in red tape, when they've been hit with a debt that they don't understand, when they are made to feel like a criminal for a simple mistake, that is not just policy failure, that is a failure of justice. This bill delivers a long overdue reforms. It brings compassion, common sense and accountability back into the way how we treat people who rely on our social security system. We want this system to be a bridge, not a barrier. And that's why we're introducing this bill to the House. Firstly, this bill amends the small debt waiver threshold. The small debt waiver is a legal mechanism under the Social Security Act that allows the government to forgive certain low-value debts owed by welfare recipients, where it's not cost-effective for the Commonwealth to take action to recover it. For 30 years, the so-called small debt waiver has been frozen. It's a current range of $50 to $200. $50 unchanged since the 1990s, when the average cost of rent or a grocery bill looked nothing like it does today. In 2025, a small debt of $50 is insulting. It doesn't reflect the real world. This so-called small debt is no longer a reflection of what small debt means to people today. To put it in plain language, this threshold was set when petrol was under 70 cents a litre. The median rent in Sydney was around $170 per week, and power prices were half of what they are now. Times have changed. Our welfare system must keep up with them. The administrative costs of chasing a $150 debt often exceeds the debt itself, which means taxpayers lose too. This reform is not about leniency, it's about efficiency, compassion and common sense. This bill increases the waiver threshold to $250. That means approximately 1.2 million debts, many of them impossible to recover without spending more taxpayers' money in administration than the debt itself, will simply not be raised. This is the right outcome. Economic Justice Australia, the peak advocacy organisation for community legal centres that assists people with Services Australia, calls this reform a game changer that removes a lot of unnecessary stress from people's lives. Indeed, these are people that are already vulnerable and experiencing hardship. People on income support are more likely to live under or near the poverty line. And these same people have often accrued debt because of systemic overpayment or miscalculation issues. That is, through no fault of their own. We're talking about young people from rough families, single parents, or Australians who have a disability. These are the people most likely to be receiving these payments and thus receiving debts in the first place. For many of these people, the MyGov email landing in their inbox isn't just a notification. Sometimes a heavy pit in their stomach. That notification of a debt means a complete recalculation of their budget, of where their next meal is going to come from, or how the already overdue bill is going to be paid. We also know that Services Australia can be very difficult to navigate for people without in-depth experience of government and its procedures. Now, I'm not saying that these procedures are out of place. We should be strict on the paperwork required to receive payments from Services Australia and the checks and balances that come along with it. But for someone already experiencing disadvantage or with low computer literacy skills, or escaping violence without all of their relevant documentation, or even with little time on their hands because they're looking after kids or relatives. It can be really easy to make a mistake when applying for payments. In circumstances like this, we should be giving people a helping hand rather than punishing them for their small mistakes. Of course, where debts appear to stem from fraud, Services Australia have the power to investigate them more closely. But the majority of those Australians holding these debts have received them through no fault of their own. This impactful reform means Services Australia can focus more on what it should be doing, and that is supporting people who need help, not wasting energy hustling for small debts. It also says to the taxpayer, we are spending your money wisely, focusing on serious misconduct and fraud, rather than chasing loose change from those doing it tough. Another part of this bill I want to highlight is the protection it gives to victim survivors of family and domestic violence. As many in this chamber will know, financial abuse is one of those most insidious forms of coercive control. It is a way for perpetrators to trap partners and children, to keep them dependent, and to punish them long after they have escaped. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 14 men have experienced violence from an intimate partner since the age of 15. As a community, we now understand what has long been true, that violence extends beyond the physical and that it appears as emotional and financial coercion too. For many that find themselves in this situation, that looks like credit cards being taken out in their name, the emptying of joint bank accounts, and the diversion of welfare monies to another account. From my time working at St Vincent's de Paul Society, New South Wales, looking after a rather large team covering from Wyong to Helensburgh out to Blue Mountains, including my own electorate of Barton, the Vinnie's team and I saw the terrible impacts of coercive control and financial abuse on the lives of many people, mainly women, escaping domestic violence. Under our current laws, if a person accrued a debt because they were coerced into signing forms or providing false information, they could still be held liable. This debt is yet another burden that hangs over the victim at one of the most difficult times in their life. Think about that for a moment. The victim punished for their abuser's actions. That is not only cruel, it undermines our commitment to end violence against women and children. This bill changes that. It gives Services Australia the discretion to waive debts in cases where coercion or financial abuse was a factor. It builds on the work of the 2024 Joint Parliamentary Inquiry into Financial Abuse, and it reflects our commitment to entrench protection into every arm of the Commonwealth. As someone who's worked with vulnerable clients, I cannot overstate the importance of this change. It tells victim survivors that we see you, we believe you, and we will not allow the system to be weaponised against you. When you come forward, you do not have to do so in fear of debt or of unjust consequences. Services Australia is here to help you rebuild and move forward, rather than binding you to the violence of your past, because we understand that financial security is a core part of ending domestic violence, and that safety is not just physical, it's economic. Now, I know this part of the bill may sound a bit technical, but for thousands of Australians, it matters deeply. From 1991 to 2020, a method known as income apportionment was used to calculate debts. The practice was inconsistent with the law at the time. It was unfair. And while it has not been used under this Albanese Labor government, we cannot simply reopen decades' worth of historical cases, some of them already repaid, many involving people who have already since passed away, without causing fresh uncertainty and distress. So this bill draws a line in the sand. It clarifies the law to close off the uncertainty, but more importantly, it also establishes the income apportionment resolution scheme. That means people with potentially affected debts between 1 September 2003 and 6 December 2020 can apply for a resolution payment of up to $600. It's not perfect justice. Nothing can fully undo the harm caused, but it is recognition. It is a step towards closure. It is an acknowledgement that the system got it wrong. And at its core, this bill is about respect. Respect for the people who use the social security system, most of whom are engaging in good faith, trying to do the right thing and juggling low incomes, insecure work, and rising cost of living. It's also about making sure people can trust the social security system after trauma of robo-debt scheme. Australians deserve to know that we have learned from those mistakes and that our systems are transparent, lawful, and humane. When I door knock in Rockdale, Kingsgrove, Hurstville, and across my electorate of Barton, I hear the same thing again and again. People just want systems that treat them fairly, clearly, and with dignity. They don't want bureaucracy that punishes them for being poor, sick, or in a crisis. Moreover, we want to make sure that these people can access help to navigate the new resolution scheme. We're equipping Economic Justice Australia and the Australian Council of Social Services with $400,000 each. We want to make sure they have the resources available for those impacted by the scheme. I know too that my team will be ready to help anyone in my electorate of Barton who finds themselves in this situation by simply attending my electorate office at Level 2, 24 Montgomery Street in Cogra, or sending me an email at ashambihaipahar.mp@aph.gov.au. We have a dedicated space for quiet conversations, staff on hand to help you navigate that system. I know the empathetic and efficient team at Services Australia Rockdale will also be on deck, as they are always there to help a lot of our electorate members. This bill begins to change the culture of our welfare system. It says, no more chasing debts that cost more to collect than what they're worth. No more punishing women who've already endured abuse. No more letting historic injustices fester. Deputy Speaker, we in this chamber have a responsibility to make systems work for people, not against them. We have a duty of service for these people to recognise their hardship, to help lift them up into better lives. We cannot bring fairness to every corner of social security system overnight. But this bill we are taking important practical steps in the right direction. As the member for Barton, I welcome these changes. As a lawyer, I know how overdue they are. And as someone who believes in the dignity of every person, I will always stand up for a social security system that reflects compassion, fairness, and justice.